Right. So, hey everyone, I'm Stephen Fenley. I'm an Azure specialist at Microsoft, and I'm here with Pete and Victor from Nasuni. Now, Nasuni's caught a lot of interest with the managed Microsoft accounts that I've been introducing you guys to because you fill some, I think, unique space with some of the technology you guys have developed on Azure. Would you just kick things off and tell us what's special about you guys?
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. Thank you very much. Really, what Nasuni is at its core is an enterprise file system. But what we do uniquely is that we are consolidating legacy on-prem technologies in the form of Windows file servers, NetApp, Isolons, and moving those workloads into an Azure tenant account. Um, Also, that is replacing any needs for a backup or a DR solution. So some significant cost savings associated with that, but also simplicity into one management console.
So, kind of describe for me maybe then Nasuni and where you fall in the landscape of other solutions that are out there, including Azure Files.
Yeah, great question. So Nasuni, replaces the primary NAS, the Windows file servers. We provide our customers with file share access and then leverage the cloud. So we really can. We're a great alternative to using something like Azure Files, Azure File Sync, because we have no limitations. We're one of Azure's largest partners. We leverage Azure Blob Storage and provide similar capabilities and services as a primary file share service like Azure File Sync, but we do it with no limitations.
So I know another one of Nasuni's benefits is that it can actually drive down the infrastructure cost itself, even when compared to Azure Files, because you guys are exclusively leveraging cool storage in the cloud. And this
Yeah.
is where it starts getting the attention of some of my customers because we have some other high-end solutions in Azure that have really expensive hardware that sit in our data center. But you guys are leveraging cool storage and yet bringing some of the same experiences of those high-end services to the customer. And so maybe just take us a little bit deeper, Pete, and how this, how it works with Nasuni, so you can kind of get a look under the hood.
hmm Yeah. So because of our caching algorithms at the edge and our file system, we do not go to the cloud for data often. 98% of the time, when a user goes to open a file, it's already locally cached. That's because we have efficiencies in the file system. There's a lot of things that go on in the background that keep that data local for the users. So you have a small footprint at the edge that's only caching the hot data. And then because of that, the lack of having to go to cloud so often and be faced with egress fees, we can leverage the cool object storage tiers so that the cost is very efficient for our customers.
Mm-hmm. And so then maybe break down it for me one step further. How is that different than using Azure File Sync? Because that offers some form of on-premise help there as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we have some efficiencies, like I said, built into the product. So we are chunking up data into smaller pieces. And so when we pull data down, we're not pulling a large file down to the appliance. We're pulling many little small pieces. So it makes it very efficient from a speed perspective. That's compressed data as well.
Another benefit has to do with some of the overhead, right, with upkeep of Azure File Sync versus Nasuni, because you guys are kind of bringing a true SaaS service, as well as setting up and managing something in the cloud if you were to do it yourself with Azure Files. Maybe just how does that work with Nasuni?
Really, with Nasuni, it's an edge caching appliance and then the object storage. So you as an Azure customer, all you do is bring us a storage account. We use that as a credential on the appliances, and we create a volume for Nasuni that becomes a container in Azure. That's really all you need to have for Nasuni file services to work. We format that container in our file system, UniFS. So that's just two pieces, right? An on-prem appliance, and then you're administering just the object storage in the container in with the storage account. So with Azure Files, you'd have to have, Azure Files. You'd have to administer the Azure File snapshots, Azure Backup, and then you have the on-prem Windows file server. And all the administration that comes with that, backing up the system state of that Windows file server so that if you ever had to recover it, you'd be able to get that server back. All of that stuff is included in Nasuni. So all of our appliances, the system state of them is actually kept in cloud. So you can run a disaster recovery on a Nasuni appliance in just, less than 15 minutes. Whatever third-party backup product you're using for your Windows file server, you'd then have to, restore that server, then restore the system state, and then you have to start thinking about how to restore that file data.
Yeah. So we're saying infrastructure cost now is shrinking. You're leveraging cool storage. We're saying setup and overhead of upkeep with the whole system is shrinking now too, because of the proprietary technology you guys are bringing to the table. And so now talk to me maybe about a third piece here, and that's security. That's when you guys have mentioned to me a few times that I'll be honest with you, I don't think I even fully understand yet.
Yeah, sure. Yep. So once you write data to Nasuni to an edge appliance, we use AES 256 encryption to encrypt that data. That ends up in our file system, UniFS, in your container. So if anyone were ever to compromise your container internally, if you opened up the Azure Explorer to look at the data inside your container, all you're going to see is UniFS Nasuni formatted objects. So at flight and at rest, essentially, your data is all encrypted, and no one can access that data aside from coming through a Nasuni appliance, which are all Active Directory integrated. So they'll need their standard Kerberos identification and IDs to log in that way. And then from a ransomware protection, like the other side of security, you have our rapid ransomware recovery. Because our file system is worm, so we're only writing once and then we're reading many times. We never overwrite any objects in the entire file system, and we continuously version that data. So every time we take a snapshot from the appliance, that's a new version of the file system. So the previous versions are never touched by us, Nasuni, in the file system, nor can they be touched by any type of user, right? So that gives you that ability to restore from the file, the folder, or the entire file system, the volume itself, from any one of those point-in-time snapshots. And we do those snapshots around, every 5 to 10 minutes. You can configure them to do. That's a vast difference between us and some of the Azure Files products. That gives you a unlimited amount of backups too. When I said before, there's no limitations that are put on the customers when using Nasuni, file counts, file types. That also applies to snapshots. So I know there's some limitations with the snapshot counts with Azure Files. We have customers with over 100 million snapshots.
Now, yours is it's essentially a SaaS solution. So this environment where all this information is being kept in Azure is something that you manage or the customer manages?
Yeah, so that's kind of the beauty of it. You, as the customer, have the keys to your data, right? Nasuni doesn't know anything about your actual data. We can't get into it. You hold the encryption keys at the appliance level, and then you manage your Azure account, and you work with Azure to manage that capacity itself and pay for that capacity on that side.
So they're going to have the tenant where the blob storage is that Nasuni is leveraging, essentially. So they're in
Yep.
complete control of their whole environment. Okay.
Complete control. You can also tie in the underlying Azure, capabilities into that container with things like LRS, ZRS, GRS.
Okay.
So it's really a flexible option. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Pete, were there some other things that you wanted to visualize for some of our managed accounts today?
Sure. Yeah, let me just share out my screen here and take you through a quick whiteboard on what Nasuni does and how we do it. So I kind of described how it's Azure blob storage and the edge appliance itself. So the Nasuni virtual machines or edge caching appliances are what serve the users their file shares. So they connect to them through UNC paths or map drives. They'll write that data to these appliances on an interval, let's say every 5 minutes. We take a snapshot and we write that data out to object storage in a version timeline. That's UniFS.
Okay.
That's our file system, right? What that does is that gives the users the ability to restore from any one of these versions the file, the folder, or the entire volume. These are Active Directory joined, so they're in Active Directory. So users won't know that they've ever moved off of Windows file servers or any other type of NAS because we honor all of the permissions. Users can connect with SMB, CIFS, or NFS as well.
Okay.
And so we're taking that data and we're compressing it. We're chunking it up into smaller pieces, and then we use AES 256 encryption.
Okay.
To protect that data in flight and then at rest in your cool Azure blob storage. So what this does for our customers is saves them on one capacity. So at the edge, let's say you had 100 terabytes. This edge caching appliance is just a small subset of that total capacity. So typically we do about 5% of the total capacity. You're just going to keep the hot data at that local appliance that needs to be readily accessed and fast access for the user. So let's say right now you have a 100 terabyte Windows file server. You're going to replace that with maybe a 5 terabyte local Nasuni appliance. That, like I said, that can be a hardware appliance or it can be a lightweight VM on any of the hypervisors, VMware.
And would there be a compression rate on that in the cloud then?
Yep, exactly.
What would that be? So what would 100 terabytes be in the cloud?
Yeah, so typically we're seeing with our customers about a 40% rate of compression savings.
Okay.
So that 100 terabytes that you're now storing on-prem on some, SAN or NAS or some on-prem, spinning disks or SSDs, that footprint is going to drastically decrease. And now it's only going to be 60 terabytes of actual consumption in cloud. So you're thinking about on-prem capacity savings. You don't have to replicate that data. Nasuni has now backed up all of those files into the cloud, and we're handling that backup for you. So you don't need to back that data up, but also that you don't need to replicate that to another site offsite, right? We're handling that for you, and Azure is handling that for you. Your data just by default in LRS is 3 different copies in different racks in the same data center. So you're already replicating that data to a disaster recovery location at that point. So no need to replicate the data to somewhere else and consume that capacity, and no reason to have an on-prem backup destination to store that data in some other version. Remember, we're versioning that data out in the cloud for you to be able to restore from any one of those versions. And that's unlimited, right? We have customers with over 100 million snapshots out in the cloud.
Right. Okay.
And I guess 2 would be that backup and DR that I covered. These appliances are stateless. You can always just rebuild one. They're also all active. So you can go into the Azure Marketplace and deploy a Nasuni appliance. And if a user, for some reason, this site goes inactive, you can always redirect users to another appliance.
Oh, cool.
Yep. That goes for any other site also.
Wow.
So our DR strategy is really robust. You either use another edge appliance or you rebuild that appliance because it's stateless. The running state of that appliance is in the cloud. In less than 15 minutes, you can stand that appliance back up.
Wow.
And then, 3 is just that collaboration on files. And that's where that capability of, once all the data is into a central file system, you can share that data out to any one of these appliances. So now your M drive has the same exact data at site 1 and site 2.
So what is that? You must have a way to handle this, because like when you're doing a setup for those large files, for CAD drawings or whatever it is, what happens with locking a file or versioning or collaboration? Like, what does that look like on the Nasuni?
Yeah, so you're used to, or most customers are used to, single appliance opportunistic file locking. We've taken that through the Nasuni Global File Services platform and traversed those locks to all of the appliances in your infrastructure, and that's a directory level setting. So you can always flag some directories for globally lock enabled and some not. So in the case of those applications like AutoCAD and Revit, where global locking is required because you can never merge those changes, right? An Excel file you can click and drag, right? But when it comes to a design file, you could waste hours of work if one user edits over top of another. So that's when global locking will tell a user at one site that the file is locked for, read only, and they can either, request to be alerted, or they can, call the user up and say, hey, I really want to get in that file, and go ahead and save your changes. But it will prohibit that multi-editing in files that you really want to manage who is in them and accessing them at the time.
So they would know who's accessing it if they couldn't, they showed locked.
Yeah, so they'll so it depends on the application, of course, and how it can report. But from a Nasuni side, let's say your administrator has access to the NMC, our Nasuni Management Console, which manages all of your edge appliances that are in your environment. You can jump into the NMC and you can see every globally file locked file in your entire environment. And aside, some of our competitors have this problem where locks can get held hostage at a given site. Our Nasuni Management Console has the ability to unlock those files from the NMC. So you can always kick someone off of a file, in an emergency purpose, situation. But it's really flexible. So it gives you that ability to manage those things, and you can see who has the files locked. We have some customers that use our APIs to see who has files locked. So one of a big engineering firm that we work with, they built a website that their users can just go to and they can see who has files locked. It's really kind of cool.
Okay, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for showing us this.
Yeah, no problem.
On one level, anybody can leverage it, but there are some use cases I've noticed just in my portfolio of customers that particularly gravitate to you guys. And do you guys want to just hit some situations that you guys typically hit out of the park?
Yeah, so we are great at large files dispersed amongst many sites. We're really flexible. You can drop appliances at multiple offices and enable all of your users to have access to the same file data amongst all of those sites with no limitations. And that's really powerful when it comes to our architecture, engineering, construction firms. They're dealing with large engineering drawings and large types of files. The media companies that have large design files, and then even
And I have to put a plug in there because I've had this conversation many times. If any of my managed accounts are watching and they've been exploring Azure Virtual Desktop or Citrix in Azure or whatever it is, like Nasuni's the perfect complement in that situation as well.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And then, mergers and acquisitions, you bring on a new company that has a completely different architecture than what you're currently running. You just drop a Nasuni appliance out there, ingest the data. Now you have complete control over their entire environment, and the files are accessible to the rest of the company through the global file services itself.
Right. So say a customer is interested in learning more, maybe wants to try some things out or learn more. What would be their best next steps going from this video, to learning more or doing more with Nasuni?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they could reach out directly to you, Stephen, and we could set up a first call meeting where we could just do a quick Q&A of what your current environment looks like, what challenges that you're trying to solve, and then we'd just kind of go into a quick whiteboard session of how Nasuni be implemented in your environment and the pain that we could solve and the use cases that we're really looking to fit.
And what does trials, demos, POCs, like what does that look like with you guys? How long if somebody decides they want to go with Nasuni or is interested in exploring it, how much investment of time does that process take?
Yeah, we can set a customer up with a proof of concept within a couple hours. I typically, in 2-hour sessions, I have you standing up with an environment with multiple appliances, all leveraging the cloud, and then you're free to kind of take that through your own trial. I even set up test plans and take you through that as well.
And then what about the on-premise, piece with the specialized hardware that you bring? Like, how does that fit into it?
Yeah, so we can run on any of the hypervisors. That's usually the easiest, best way to go, especially for a proof of concept. But we do have hardware appliances that we can ship out, and our customers can purchase and leverage if they don't have hypervisor technology on-prem.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's great. Again, I know it's hit kind of a sweet spot for a lot of the people I've introduced you to already, and I think there'll be others interested in learning more. So thank you guys for coming on and sharing, and hopefully we'll have some calls soon and solving some storage problems together. So thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Sure.
Thank you, Stephen.
Awesome.
Thank you.